we're going to start our press conference. My name is Steve Zeltzer, and I'm with the United Public Workers for Action. And we're here today to call for an investigation and criminal investigation and criminal prosecution of Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi and Senator Feinstein. And the reason is that they have personally been involved in covering up the corruption at Hunters Point Bayview and Treasure Island. The effort to, first of all, the idea that that these highly contaminated radioactive sites could be remediated is really false, because since the Second World War, the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard has been contaminated with radioactive material, with all kinds of toxins. So the idea that you're going to be able to clean it up, we believe, is a false idea. And secondly, the whole development project of Hunters Point Bayview and Treasure Island was about making it profitable for condos, for million-dollar condos. So the people that pushed this actually were connected financially to Nancy Pelosi, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, and Senator Feinstein. So what we're saying is that what has happened now is that there's been a systemic corruption that's developed as a result of whistleblowers. Whistleblowers for Tetra Tech, which has gotten over $300 million for the cleanup, and whistleblowers at Test America, Michael Madry, who's a quality assurance manager at Test America. And in his case, Michael Madry actually, they speeded up testing on asbestos from 15 minutes to 50 seconds, which is impossible to have a proper testing. And when Michael Madry and another quality assurance manager raised that issue, that there was falsified testing, they were retaliated against by Test America. They were fired. And Michael Madry went to OSHA, federal OSHA, to make a complaint. He was retaliated for raising health and safety issues. And what happened was that the investigator, the federal lawyer and investigator, Darrell Whitman, who worked with the Whistleblower Protection Program, tried to do an investigation and made a merit determination that indeed he had been discriminated against, retaliated against for these health and safety issues, for complaining about these health and safety issues. What happened is that Darrell Whitman, who was a federal lawyer, was then retaliated against by his boss, Joshua Paul, and he was eventually bullied and terminated along with all the other investigators at Federal OSHA Office Region 9 in San Francisco. 3 or 4 investigators at the Federal OSHA office were retaliated against and fired. And what Darrell Whitman did was he filed a complaint to the Office of Special Counsel, to OSHA, and to the Department of Labor. At that time, the Department of Labor was headed up by Tom Perez, who is now head of the Democratic Party. And it's required that you have an investigation. What happened was Tom Perez refused to do an investigation. He obstructed an investigation. And he has now been waiting over 3 years for an investigation at the Office of Special Counsel in Washington, D.C. And we may be getting a letter of determination that he was retaliated against for raising these whistleblowing issues of health and safety at Hunters Point Bayview and at Treasure Island. So how does this relate to Congresswoman Pelosi and Senator Feinstein? It relates because Darrell Whitman and Michael Madry both made complaints to Feinstein, Senator Feinstein, and Congresswoman Pelosi. They both went there and said that they were retaliated against for whistleblowing about the falsification of testing at Hunters Point Bayview and Treasure Island. And instead of, and in the case of Senator Feinstein sent a letter back saying that she got the letter and she wanted to look at it. She never returned the call. In the case of Congresswoman Pelosi, she never answered this letter. Now, when a federal inspector, health and safety inspector, reports that there's corruption, reports that there's falsification, it's incumbent on them to investigate that. If they fail to do that, that is part of obstruction of justice, and that's exactly what we're saying has been going on. There's obstruction of justice, and when you think about it, over $1 billion of our funds, of taxpayer money, has been spent to clean up Hunters Point Shipyard and also Treasure Island, And now they're saying it's all been falsified. They have to spend another $42 million. And Congresswoman Pelosi now has got another $42 million from the recent bill, the recent budget bill, to do more testing on Hunters Point Shipyard. We think it's outrageous that we're spending $42 million to, again, retest the site. Now, who's responsible? Is it these low-level employees at Tetra Tech who are responsible for the falsification? We don't believe that. We believe that the falsification starts at the top. It starts at the top of Tetra Tech. The Tetra Tech executives know exactly what happened here. And they're being covered up by Senator Feinstein and Congresswoman Pelosi. Because the fact of the matter is Tetra Tech, the executives and the management and owners of Tetra Tech should be investigated for fraud on the American people. The management owners of Test America should be investigated for fraud. And also the Lennar Corporation, which is developing this, should be investigated for fraud and lying to the people that have bought those homes and the people of Hunters Point Bayview who've been told that it's safe. They don't have to worry. So what we're saying is that there's a systemic fraud, there's systemic corruption, and that Senator Feinstein and Congresswoman Pelosi are fully aware of this. In 2013, whistleblowers were actually fired who complained about health and safety problems at the shipyard. What did they do about it? I mean, this is federal money. This is our money that is being spent to clean it up, and whistleblowers are being fired, harassed and bullied because they report there's fraud and corruption. And our Congresswoman, Nancy Pelosi, has not a word to say.
Shame.
It's a shame. 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 When people don't have health care in San Francisco, they're dying on the streets. When kids are going hungry, when students are going hungry, she's going to spend another $42 million on testing on a site that has been already spent $1 billion, and they've had false testing. I mean, this is the kind of waste and corruption that's going on right here with the head of the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi. And the fact of the matter is, there has to be a criminal investigation, and also Michael Madry has submitted a report to the U.S. Attorney in San Francisco for there to be an investigation. Because it's not just these low-staff managers at Tetra Tech that are involved. There's a federal official, Darrell Whitman, who also was involved in this incident because he was bullied and retaliated against for exposing corruption, falsification. So we're launching a national campaign. We're demanding that there be a national investigation. This is a national story, and it really says something about the corporate press in the United States, that even though the Republicans, for example, are always talking about Pelosi and Feinstein as the big enemy, there's no national publicity from the Republicans about this. Isn't that a little strange? Here they're always attacking Nancy Pelosi, but not a word in the right-wing Republican press on Fox and other media. So that's a question of maybe they both have their hands on it. Maybe they both don't want to talk about it because there's money to be made. Now, this Treasure Island, and we're going to have a speaker who's spent a good number of years investigating Treasure Island, when Willie Brown was one of the people who pushed the development of Treasure Island. And he wanted to get it developed, even though the Navy initially said they couldn't be cleaned up, because these sites cannot be cleaned up. They're permanently contaminated. But what they looked at is money to be made by condos. So Willie Brown actually got Congresswoman Pelosi to get the government to give a visa deal to Chinese investors. So they raised over $130 million from Chinese investors if they invested in Hunters Point Naval Shipyard development with Lennar. And a lot of these Chinese investors have been built of billions of dollars for investments into Hunters Point Naval Shipyard. They're never going to get that money back because that is not going to be developed. We can say right here and right now they are not going to develop the Hunters Point Shipyard, and they're not going to develop Treasure Island. But the fact of the matter is, Willie Brown, Gavin Newsom was involved in the corruption here in San Francisco because he was in charge of the city, and he knew that people were getting sick as a result of Hunters Point Naval Shipyard. He knew that trucks were going back and forth and were putting out dust and other kinds of toxic material, and that people were getting sick. The asthma rate of kids on Hunters Point Bayview is 50%. 50% of the children have asthma. So not only that, but they made a deal, and it was probably done with the advice of Gavin Newsom, that what the city should do is they should hire an environmental engineer. And they hired this woman named Amy Brunell as a San Francisco City Health Department environmental engineer. And what she has been telling the residents is that they're not getting sick from the toxins, the chemicals, the radiation. They're getting sick from stress. That's why they're getting sick here at Hunters Point Naval Shipyard. Well, the reality is Amy Brownell's salary is being paid for by Lennar Corporation. How can you have a public official in San Francisco with the Department of Public Health telling people that everything's okay and it's just a matter of stress, and she's getting paid for by Lennar, the developer? So we're calling as well for the immediate termination of Amy Brownell from the Department of Public Health and an investigation of how this could happen. How you could have a health official with the Department of Public Health. Now that was also under Gavin Newsom, who's probably going to be the likely governor in California. So this is again it's not one person, it's not one group of people. It's a large amount of corruption that's gone on here, systemic corruption in this whole development. So our next speaker is going to be Carol Harvey. Carol Harvey is an independent journalist, and she has been writing for many, many years about the situation in Treasure Island and the toxins and the people, what the people have suffered at Treasure Island. So welcome, Carol.